The first crack in our marriage wasn't loud, it was quiet, almost imperceptible. I walked into the house one Thursday evening, juggling my briefcase and a bag of groceries, expecting the usual warmth of home. But instead, I found Jessica at the kitchen table, staring at her phone like it held the secrets to another world. We'd been married for 10 years, and while routine had replaced romance, I still believed we were solid. How wrong I was. "You're late," she said, her eyes never leaving the screen. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the tension already settling in my chest. Traffic was a nightmare. You know how it is. Her silence cut deeper than any argument could have. She didn't even look up, just kept scrolling. Something about her indifference felt heavier than usual, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I told myself it was nothing, marriage has its seasons, and not every day can feel like a love story. But deep down, a part of me knew, something was terribly wrong. I didn't confront her right away. I watched, quietly and carefully, as she became more secretive over the next few weeks. Late-night phone calls in hushed tones, new outfits she didn't show me, and a password suddenly protecting her phone. The signs were there, glaring and unmistakable, but I was too afraid to face them head-on. Instead, I convinced myself it was all in my head. One evening, I decided to test my theory. Jessica had mentioned a work dinner she needed to attend. After she left, dressed in a sleek black dress I hadn't seen before, I followed her. My heart pounded as I tailed her car. At first, I felt ridiculous, like the jealous husband in a bad movie. But when she pulled into the parking lot of a dimly lit restaurant far from her office, my stomach dropped. From my car, I watched her meet a man at the entrance. He greeted her with a hug that lingered too long, his hand resting on the small of her back. They disappeared inside together. I didn't go in. I couldn't. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, torn between storming in to confront her and driving away to preserve what little dignity I had left. In the end, I did neither. I sat there, frozen, until they emerged hours later, laughing and holding hands. The final blow was the kiss they shared before parting ways. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind replayed the scene over and over, each detail cutting deeper than the last. When Jessica returned home, she slipped into bed beside me as if nothing had happened. Her betrayal was both intimate and casual, like she'd practiced this double life for years. The confrontation came 2 days later. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, but when the moment arrived, my voice shook with anger and hurt. "Who is he, Jessica?" She froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. We were sitting at the dinner table, a half-eaten meal between us. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes darting. "The man you've been seeing. The one you kissed outside the restaurant." My words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Her facade crumbled. She put down her fork and sighed, as if my discovery was more an inconvenience than a betrayal. "His name is Ryan," she said quietly. "He's a colleague." "A colleague?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Is that what they're calling it now?" Jessica didn't flinch. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Michael. But it did. And maybe it's for the best." "For the best." Her words hit me like a physical blow. The woman I'd shared a decade of my life with, the one I'd trusted above all others, was telling me our marriage was collateral damage in her quest for something better. The betrayal was one thing. Her indifference was another. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply stood up and walked out, leaving her alone at the table. As the door closed behind me, I realized I had crossed a threshold I could never return from. The days after I walked out were a haze of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. I'd thought confronting Jessica would bring some clarity, some closure. Instead, it opened a chasm of doubt and self-loathing. But even in the depths of my despair, I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. Jessica's betrayal was blatant, but her confidence, her calm acceptance of being caught, it gnawed at me. There was more to the story, and I was determined to find it. 2 weeks later, my suspicions were confirmed in the most unexpected way. I received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about Jessica. Coffee?" The message was cryptic, but my curiosity outweighed my caution. I agreed to meet at a nearby cafe, my mind racing with possibilities. Was this someone she worked with? A friend? Another victim of her lies? When I arrived, a man in his mid-30s was waiting at a corner table. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting with a cup of untouched coffee. "You must be Michael," he said, standing to greet me. "I'm Ryan." My stomach churned at the name. The man who'd ruined my marriage was sitting across from me, looking every bit as wrecked as I felt. I wanted to walk away, to yell, to hit him. But the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't arrogance or defiance. It was fear. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. Ryan leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know Jessica was married. She told me you two were separated." I swear, if I had known, he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "But that's not why I'm here. There's something you need to know." I didn't trust him, but I stayed. Over the next hour, Ryan painted a picture of Jessica that was both shocking and horrifying. According to him, their relationship had started as a whirlwind romance, but it quickly turned toxic. Jessica had manipulated him, using her position at work to shower him with gifts and favors. When he tried to pull away, she threatened to ruin his career. "She's not who you think she is," Ryan said, his voice trembling. "She's dangerous." I left the cafe reeling. Part of me wanted to dismiss Ryan's story as a desperate attempt to shift blame, but his fear was palpable. And then there was the evidence he'd shown me, screenshots of texts, receipts for expensive dinners and gifts charged to her company card, and even an email where she'd hinted at sabotaging a colleague to secure his promotion. As much as I hated Ryan, I couldn't ignore the facts. Jessica's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, calculated, and far-reaching. The woman I'd loved for a decade was a stranger to me. I spent the next few days piecing together the fragments of my shattered reality. Conversations with mutual friends revealed more cracks in Jessica's carefully curated facade. There were rumors at her office, whispers of an investigation into misused funds and workplace misconduct. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they painted was damning. Then, the bombshell dropped. One evening, as I was settling into my new apartment, I received a call from Jessica. I hadn't heard from her since the confrontation, and the sound of her voice sent a jolt of anger and sadness through me. "Michael," she began, her tone hesitant. "I need your help." I almost laughed at the audacity. "Help? After everything you've done?" "It's not about us," she said quickly. "It's Ryan. He's making accusations at work. They're saying I misused company funds. Michael, you know me. You know I would never do that." Her plea was so desperate, so sincere, that for a moment, I almost believed her. But then I remembered the texts, the receipts, the emails. I remembered the man who'd sat across from me, terrified and broken. Jessica had lied to me for years. Why should this time be any different? "I can't help you, Jessica," I said, my voice steady. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." She begged, her voice cracking with emotion. But I didn't relent. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt in control. I had spent years bending over backward to make our marriage work, sacrificing my happiness for hers. Not anymore. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of relief. Jessica's life was unraveling, and while part of me wanted to revel in her downfall, I knew it wouldn't bring me peace. Still, I couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing that karma was finally catching up to her. And this was only the beginning. Jessica's unraveling happened faster than I expected, but it wasn't without complications. The day after our conversation, I got a call from one of our mutual friends, Lauren. Her voice was a mix of curiosity and concern. "Michael, I hate to drag you into this," she began, "but have you heard what's happening with Jessica? It's all over the office. There's an investigation, and, well, it's not looking good for her." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Yeah, Lauren. She called me about it last night." "And?" Lauren pressed, her tone eager. "And I told her I can't help," I said firmly. "I'm done being her safety net." Lauren hesitated, then dropped the bombshell. "There's more to it than just Ryan's accusations. The company found evidence of her using work funds for personal expenses. Lavish ones. Trips, jewelry, even some weird payment to a private investigator. They're saying she could face criminal charges if it goes any further." That last detail hit me like a ton of bricks. A private investigator? What on earth was Jessica looking into? My mind raced through possibilities, but none of them made sense. Was it related to me? Ryan? Something else entirely? Determined to find out, I started digging. I reached out to the private investigator's office, citing concerns about ongoing issues involving Jessica. To my surprise, the investigator was more than willing to share details, perhaps eager to clear his own name from the mess. "Jessica hired me about 6 months ago," he said. "She was convinced her coworker, Diane, was trying to sabotage her career. She wanted proof. Surveillance, background checks, the works." Diane. The name rang a bell. Jessica had mentioned her in passing, always with a hint of disdain. But as the investigator continued, the story took a darker turn. "We found nothing to support her claims," he explained. "But Jessica insisted we keep digging. When that didn't pan out, she shifted focus to Ryan. She thought he might be spying on her for Diane. It got messy." Messy was an understatement. Jessica's paranoia had spiraled into full-blown obsession, and it was all unraveling now. I thanked the investigator and hung up, my mind reeling. This wasn't just about infidelity or workplace misconduct anymore. Jessica was imploding, and she was taking everyone down with her. The next twist came a week later. Ryan's accusations had escalated to a formal complaint with HR, and the company had suspended Jessica pending further investigation. But it didn't stop there. Ryan filed a police report, claiming Jessica had coerced him into their relationship using threats and manipulation. The news spread like wildfire, turning Jessica into a pariah overnight. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a mix of pity and vindication churning in my chest. She'd built her world on lies, and now it was crumbling around her. But even as I told myself she deserved it, I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. There was still something missing, a piece of the puzzle I couldn't quite place. That piece came unexpectedly in a forwarded email I received from an anonymous account. The sender claimed to have information about Jessica's situation and urged me to read the attachment carefully. Suspicious but curious, I opened the email. Inside was a single cryptic line. "Solace is the only way out." Attached to the email were encrypted files. My curiosity outweighed my better judgment. Using a recovery program, I managed to decrypt them. What I found left me stunned. Solace wasn't just a file. It was a dossier, a detailed account of shady dealings at Jessica's company. Emails, financial records, confidential reports, evidence of corruption that went far beyond anything I'd imagined. Jessica hadn't just been misusing funds. She'd been covering for others, and in doing so, she'd become a scapegoat for their crimes. Suddenly, everything clicked. Her paranoia, her desperation, even her betrayal. Jessica wasn't just fighting for her reputation, she was fighting to survive. And now, I was holding the key to the truth. As I stared at the screen, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Should I use this to help her? Expose the corruption and clear her name? Or should I walk away, letting her face the consequences of her choices? Either way, the decision would change everything. For days, I wrestled with the decision. The dossier I had uncovered was explosive, the kind of evidence that could topple careers and dismantle entire departments at Jessica's company. It was also her only lifeline, but handing it over meant stepping back into a nightmare I'd barely escaped. I wasn't sure if I owed her that, or if I even wanted to. The tipping point came unexpectedly. Late one evening, I received a call from Ryan. His voice was shaky, his words rushed. "Michael, I don't know who else to talk to," he began. "They're coming after me now. Jessica, she's dragging me into her mess. Legal threats, countersuits. She's saying I'm the one who manipulated her." I pinched the bridge of my nose, the weight of it all pressing down on me. "Ryan, why are you telling me this? What do you expect me to do?" "I think you know more than you're letting on," he said, his voice laced with suspicion. "She's desperate, Michael. And desperate people do dangerous things. Be careful." His warning left me rattled. Ryan was no innocent victim, but his fear was genuine. Jessica was spiraling, and it was clear she would stop at nothing to save herself. I had seen glimpses of this side of her before, but never to this extent. The thought of her weaponizing the truth, or worse, twisting it, sent a shiver down my spine. 2 days later, I got my answer. I was heading to work when a black sedan pulled up in front of my apartment building. 2 men in suits stepped out, their expressions cold and unyielding. "Mr. Michael Reynolds," one of them asked, flashing a badge. "We need to ask you a few questions regarding Jessica Simmons and the ongoing investigation at her company." My stomach dropped. Jessica had officially dragged me into her chaos. They questioned me for over an hour, probing about my knowledge of her actions, her finances, even her personal relationships. I kept my answers vague, unwilling to implicate myself in any way. But the experience left me shaken. Jessica's storm was closing in, and I was caught in the eye of it. That evening, as I mulled over the day's events, my phone buzzed with another message from the anonymous account. This one was less cryptic. "They're closing in on Solace. If you want the full story, meet me at the old warehouse on 5th and Main. Midnight." It felt like a trap. My gut screamed at me to ignore it, to delete the message and walk away. But my curiosity had always been my downfall, and this time was no different. I arrived at the warehouse a few minutes before midnight, my heart pounding in my chest. The place was dark and abandoned, the air thick with dust and silence. A single figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Lauren. "You?" I asked, my voice a mix of shock and disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," she shot back, her tone sharp. "Jessica's not the only one in trouble, Michael. The corruption at her company runs deep, and she's just a pawn. They're using her to cover their tracks." Lauren handed me a flash drive. "This has everything. Names, dates, transactions. The whole operation. But if this gets out, it won't just take down the company. It'll destroy Jessica completely." I stared at the drive in my hand, the weight of it almost unbearable. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're the only one who can decide what to do with it," she said, her expression somber. "You're out of it, Michael. You have no skin in the game. But Jessica, she's running out of time." I left the warehouse more conflicted than ever. The flash drive felt like a ticking time bomb, its contents capable of dismantling everything Jessica had built, and everything she destroyed to protect. As I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the small piece of plastic and metal in my hand, I realized there was no easy answer. I could expose the truth, vindicating Jessica but implicating her in a larger scandal. Or I could bury it, letting her face the consequences of her actions while sparing her from total annihilation. Either way, the decision would change both of our lives forever. The next morning, I made my choice. Sitting in front of my laptop, the flash drive plugged in, I composed an email addressed to Jessica's company's HR department. Attached were the files from the drive, along with a message outlining everything I had learned. I kept it factual, emotionless, and concise. It wasn't about revenge or redemption. It was about the truth. And Jessica's fate was no longer in my hands. As I hit send, a strange calm washed over me. For months, I'd been tangled in Jessica's web of lies and manipulation. Now, I was free. But that freedom came at a cost. I knew the fallout would be catastrophic, and part of me wondered if I'd done the right thing. Still, there was no turning back. The storm hit faster than I anticipated. Within days, news of the scandal broke. Headlines splashed across business journals and social media painted a damning picture of Jessica's company. Executives were implicated, employees came forward with accusations, and an avalanche of evidence supported claims of corruption that reached far beyond Jessica. Jessica herself became the face of the scandal. Her name trended for all the wrong reasons, her photo plastered alongside phrases like corporate greed and scapegoat or mastermind. Public opinion was divided. Some saw her as a victim, a pawn used by those in power. Others viewed her as complicit, a willing participant in the scheme. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. One evening, as I was scrolling through the endless barrage of coverage, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lauren. "You did the right thing," it read. "No matter how this ends, the truth had to come out." Her words brought little comfort. The truth, I realized, was a double-edged sword. While it exposed the rot within Jessica's company, it also destroyed any chance she had of rebuilding her life. But perhaps that was the point. Actions have consequences, and Jessica's choices had finally caught up with her. A week later, Jessica reached out. Her voice, once confident and sharp, was now small and unsteady. "Michael," she began, "I don't even know why I'm calling. Maybe I just needed to hear a familiar voice." I remained silent, letting her speak. She told me about the investigation, the legal battles, the friends who had turned their backs on her. She didn't ask for forgiveness, and she didn't blame me for what had happened. Instead, she sounded defeated. "I thought I could control it all," she said, her voice breaking. "But I was wrong. And now, I've lost everything." For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Despite everything, Jessica was still human, flawed and broken like the rest of us. But I knew better than to let my guard down. Her words, no matter how sincere they seemed, couldn't erase the pain she had caused. "I'm sorry, Jessica," I said finally. "But this is your battle now. I hope you find a way to move forward." The call ended, and with it, the last tether to the life we had shared. Jessica's fate was no longer my concern. My own life, once defined by her choices, was now my own to rebuild. In the weeks that followed, I focused on moving forward. Therapy sessions helped me process the trauma, while reconnecting with old friends reminded me of the person I used to be. Slowly but surely, I began to find peace. As for Jessica, the fallout continued. She faced multiple lawsuits and even criminal charges. Her career was in ruins, her reputation irreparably damaged. And yet, in the rare updates I received through mutual acquaintances, I heard whispers of resilience. Jessica was fighting to rebuild, piece by fragile piece. Whether she would succeed, I couldn't say. Looking back, I realized that the story wasn't just about betrayal or revenge. It was about choices, the ones we make, the ones forced upon us, and the ones we must live with. Jessica made her choices, and I made mine. In the end, we both paid the price. The experience changed me. It taught me the value of boundaries, the importance of self-respect, and the power of letting go. I no longer felt anger or resentment toward Jessica. Instead, I felt gratitude, not for what she did, but for what I learned because of it. And as I stood on the threshold of a new chapter, I knew one thing for certain: the past would no longer define me. The future was mine to write, and this time, I was holding the pen.